everybody. Well, thank you for coming to this session. We have this session to commemorate Francois Houtart, who is one of the initiators of the World Social Forum. He died in June last year in Quito. We have managed to publish his biography, and it is in English. We would like to show you a video where we have some photos and a short video of Francois Houtart. So, please.
Ela disse que vai começar já, eu vou traduzir o que ela falar, mas antes ela queria mostrar umas fotos de Francois Houtart.
in Cuba it's difficult to disagree with Fidel, no? It's practically almost impossible but Fidel likes that, you know. He likes to have a possible discussion. So I remember that was a seminar on Marxist thinking and the importance for today of a Marxist thinking. And so I choose to speak about a Marxist analysis of the World Social Forum. And so I began to make the analysis of the Social Forum. And then when I finished that, Fidel asked the word. And he said, it was at the time that the Social Forum decided to go to India, Bombay. So Fidel said, why did you decide in the International Committee to go out of Latin America for the World Social Forum, just at a time that imperialism is extremely aggressive against Latin America, and at the time that there is the move toward some new political movements in Latin America, and that is just that time that you choose to go out of Latin America. Why? So I said, well, Commandant, it's very simple. The World Social Forum is a world forum, and it cannot remain only in Latin America. So it has to go different parts of the world. So Fidel again said, no. This is the result of a decision of Europeans with a few Brazilians. So I said, well, Comandante, I don't believe in the complot theory. There was no complot. You say complot, I don't know, or you say that there was no, not a small group trying to manipulate the matter. It was really because of the world character of the World Social Forum. And I said, if you say that the World Social Forum should always happen in Latin America, that is a Latin American centrist position. Oof, there was a big noise in the hall, people shooting, and saying, well, what you have attacked the position of Fidel, whatever. And then the Minister of Culture is a good friend, Abel Prieto, stood up and he said, Francois, you cannot accuse Cuba of being Latin American centrist. We have helped Vietnam, we have helped Angola, we are sending thousands of doctors all over the world. So I said, but that is not the question. Of course, Cuba has an international vision, but if you pretend that the World Social Forum should stay in Latin America, that is a Latin American centrist position. And the people again were shooting all over. It was terrible. So at once then Fidel asked the word again. And he said to me, are there social movement in India? So I said, well, Comandante, there are social movements in India who have 10 times as many members of all the social movements in Latin America. So the struggle was going on. So the discussion was going on, and people are asking the word to defend my position. Some others were defending the position of Fidel. Anyway, Fidel was very happy about this discussion. And it went on and on and on till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and no lunch. And a few months later, I saw Abel Prieto, and the Minister of Culture. And he told me, you know what Fidel told me? He was right.
Today we are here to commemorate Francois Houtart, and we would like to talk about him as a person and also him with his ideas for the common good of humanity. And we will soon have a few more friends who will join us.
Hoje estamos aqui para comemorar Francois Houtart como uma pessoa, seus objetivos, e outras pessoas vão se juntar para falar dele também.
And but before we start, I would like to quote Samir Amin. He is a very good friend and works together with Francois in the World Forum for Alternatives. Samir Amin
vai se juntar também para falar dele.
This is what Samir Amin has written about Francois.
Aqui o que Samir Amin escreveu sobre François.
Great ideas do not have any procreators, they say. They germinate on the fertile ground of collective struggles. They are refinement in the open and frank debate of their actors. Great ideas are the collective inventions of mankind. No, the great just ideas also have procreators. Those who, a little more lucid than others, endeavor to understand the unavoidable requirements of the coherence of thought and action. Beyond this lucidity, those who persevere with courage so that the great righteous ideas become material forces that change the world. Francois is an exemplary model. From 1996 onwards, he was able to counter the invasive tide of the liberal virus and to think of the need for a world forum that would become one of the privileged places to build the effectiveness of the resistance of the people who were victims of the system. He expressed this to Louvain-le-Neuve in 1996, an idea that convinced all of us. Without him, the World Forum for Alternatives, founded a year later in Cairo, would probably not have been born. Without him, the entry of this forum on the stage in Davos in 1999 would probably not have been imagined. Read the manifesto of the World Forum for Alternatives. The precision of the great just ideas that you will find here, their formulation with all the power of poetry, owe much to him. Let us not say to Francois, thank you for all that you have done and continue to do so. Let us say to him, we want to do as you do, as much as you do, as well as you do. So this is what Samir Amin wrote on the 90th birthday of Francois Houtart.
Samir Amin escreveu isso no aniversário
On his 90th birthday.
No aniversário dele de 90 anos.
Yes. Okay, yes. So we would like to, first invite Francine to tell us a little bit about Francois and also about his main work, which is the Manifesto for the Common Good of Humanity.
Francine vai falar um pouco sobre François e sobre o manifesto principal dele.
Good afternoon. My name is Francine Mestrum. I come from Brussels, Belgium, so compatriota de Francois Houtart. I am a member of the board of CETRI, Centre Tricontinental, the ONG that Francois Houtart has founded.
Ela é da Bélgica, compatriota de Francois Houtart, e vai falar um pouco dele, basicamente.
Member of the board of CETRI.
Ah, sim. Centre Centre. Ah, sim, ela é membro do Conselho Centre.
So let me start with a couple of words on my own relationship to Francois Houtart. It is thanks to him that I'm here at the World Social Forum. When I published my first book on poverty and the politics of the World Bank, Francois Houtart was very, very positive, and he said, "Why don't you come to the World Social Forum?" I said, "Oh, can I do that?" Me? Yes, of course, you. So I came for the first time in 2003, the third forum. I came to Porto Alegre, and Francois showed me around. And he said, "Here is this, and here is that, and now here I have to leave you because there is the International Council and you cannot come in." I said, "Oh, is that the way the forum is working?" "Yes, that's how it is working." So I thought, okay, I have to keep that in mind because I want to be in there. And the year after I was in there. But so I kept coming to the World Social Forum. And I kept working with Francois and with his NGO. Now, what I would like to say about Francois Houtart are two things, or three things. One, Francois was not a hero. He was a human being, as we all are. A human being with his strong characteristics and his weak characteristics. And one of his strongest and best characteristics was his open mind. He was open to the whole world and to all people. I am not a Catholic. Francois is a Catholic priest. We never talked about religion. I guess he knew that I'm not a Catholic. But we never talked about it. He was really a very, very open mind and a very, very kind person. And the second thing, and that is very important, and that is why I appreciate him so very much, is that till the last day of his life, he was open to new ideas. I think we all know important intellectuals that have been living and working on the same ideas all their life. Whereas Francois, with the time and with times changing, he also changed his analysis. He changed the solutions that he proposed. And he was really innovative. And he is the one who came out with, he was 90, I think, or almost 90, with this idea of the common good of humanity. And that was really, it was also under the influence of his life in Ecuador, and the ideas of buen vivir, the good life. And that on that basis, he worked on this concept of common good of humanity. These are 4 points, because for him, this was an alternative to capitalism. It was a proposal for systemic change. And it was 4 points. One, in line with all the criticisms in Latin America on modernity, Francois said, yes, we have to criticize modernity, but take care. We do not have to reject modernity. What we should do, most of all, is rethink modernity and make the link between humankind and nature. Because that is what Western modernity has not done. It has made the separation between nature and humans. So we have to reconciliate them again. That is one. Second, we have to look at the economy, obviously. And we have to change the whole idea of the exchange value with the use value. And we have to rethink systems of production. I'm now really make a very, very short summary, of course. The third point is democratization. Democratization of everything. Because people want to be involved in the things that happen around us and that happen to their own lives. And the fourth point is the point about interculturality, not multiculturality, interculturality. Also, under the influence of his life in Ecuador, the last years of his life, where he lived with indigenous people. So these 4 points were for him very important to come to a new system. Now you may see that some things are missing in that framework. And we had very difficult discussions around that, because what is missing, I think, from the work I am doing on social justice and on solidarity is precisely solidarity and social justice. So we have tried to put this into that framework. He was not so very happy with it, because he looked at social policies the way they existed in Brazil, with the Bolsa Familia, a very often a charitable approach. So we had discussions on that, but in the end he accepted that we should indeed work on solidarity and social justice. There is another thing I would like to say about this whole concept of common good of humanity. Because it is a very strong concept. At the same time, it is a risk.
Could you repeat the concept? First word for humanity.
Common good, le bien commun de l'humanité. Le bien commun de l'humanité. The common good of humanity. Now, what is risky about this concept? It is a philosophical concept. In fact, with its roots in Christianity. What is risky about this concept is that people are going to use it in a different way, which means they start speaking about common goods of humanity, which is something totally different. Or they speak about common goods in general and think that they are talking about this, which is not true. Or they are speaking about the commons and think they are speaking about common good of humanity. And these are all different concepts. And if you want to use these concepts in a political way, which is what Francois Houtart wanted, he wanted us to do political work with this framework of common good of humanity, then we have to take care to make the difference between the philosophical concept of common good of humanity and common goods, which are all the goods that we share, water, the forests, everything that we share, and the commons, which is again a political concept when people take into their hands the management of the common goods. But these are 3 different things. And the only thing I can say is that this project of common good, the common good of humanity, is very, very useful if we want to reflect on systemic change. At the same time, if we work on common goods and on commons, you can also invert the whole reasoning, which means that you start working on water, on forests, on food production, on everything that we share, and from there you go to the systemic change. So there are two strategies, in fact. You start working on this general framework of common good of humanity, and from there, you work on democracy, you work on the economy, you work on culture, or you start at the other side, you start working on food, on water, on forests, and from there, you go to this framework of common good of humanity. But what is important to say, and I want to conclude with this, is that Francois really had a very, very strong analysis of today's world. And he was very, very good in seeing what people wanted, what people needed, and how to translate the theoretical frameworks into practical political work. And I think that is the lesson we should learn from him, together with his open mind, his openness for innovative ideas, because I think that is something we can all learn from, especially here in the World Social Forum, where too often we are seeing conflicts where we should be trying to overcome these conflicts. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for this invitation. Of course, it's very emotionally strong to speak from Francois, because we had a long common story, including in the World Social Forum, and as Francine says, I am Gustave Massiah. My name is Gustave Massiah. I am member of many French Solidarity Association. I am member of many French Solidarity Association and member of the IC of the World Social Forum, where I represent a coalition, a collective of French associations. Its name is CRID. Okay. And I am also member of the Global University of Sustainability. Thank you to organize this. Okay, so I'd say that in fact I knew Francois from very, very long, and in fact I think it was something at the end of the 60s and the beginning of the 70s of the 19th century.
19th century.
No, 20th century. 20th century. Of the 90s.
Not so long.
Of the 90s. And in fact, there was in Europe some places that understood the importance of decolonization. And that decolonization was a new step in the story of humanity. And Francois was one of them. And he created the CETRI, who was really working on this, and with this idea that the question of decolonization and the new world is not a question of humanitarian, it's a political question. And that the fight is a political one. And the CETRI was one of the center in Europe, with the CETIM in Geneva and with some other, and with some people, Bernard in this room, we were creating the CEDETIM, which was the Center of International Solidarity, and it was the same network with the CETRI and the CETIM and some other association. So it was a very, very long common history. And the CETRI had a very good idea. Francois was living in the office of the CETRI. He was sleeping on a camp, comment on dit, un lit de camp, on a bed, a small bed. And he had a very important idea. His idea was to say, we have to give the floor to people from the South. And so the review that he had created of the CETRI, Alternative Sud, was one of the very few reviews where all the articles, perhaps all less one or two, were articles coming from people of the South. And so it was the idea that decolonization was also a cultural revolution. And I think that Francois gave many things on this idea. Give the floor to people of the South. And when he say people of the South, he say people of the movement, people intellectual, researchers, and many people. And in fact, it was not the mode at this moment, always question of movement, social movements, people from social movements. And so we had a very long parallel story in many associations, and he was really always present. And he was always present with this capacity to link the human perception of people and political perception of people. This was, I think, a very, very important phase of Francois. And at the end of the 90s, with Samir Amin and Francois, and some other, Pierre Baudet, who is here in the forum, and other people from Italy, Luciana Castellina, and some other people. Francois was one of the founders with Samir of the World Forum of Alternatives. The first time that we have created this, it was in Cairo. It was a meeting in Cairo, I remember, with approximately 20 or 30 persons coming from different parts of the world. It was in 1997, I remember, if I remember. And in 1998, with Samir and Francois, we decided to make a demonstration at Davos. So we arrived at Davos, at the World Economic Forum. Davos is a World Economic Forum. Davos is a little city in Switzerland. And in fact, we were approximately 15 people. 15 people with Samir and Francois, with some people of ATTAC, Bernard Cassen and some founders of ATTAC. And we say that an anti-Davos was needed. An anti-Davos was needed. And it was really absolutely, how do you say, caricatural. because we were 15 with 10 more policemen around us. And in fact, as Davos is a very small town, we were put in a small place, but happily, we had the opportunity to have 4 newspapers, 4 journalists that came. And it is starting from this, one of the start of this, that 1 year after was created by ATTAC, by Bernard Cassen, by the World Forum of Alternatives, and some others, the proposal of the World Social Forum, and the first meeting of the World Social Forum in Porto Alegre. So, well, this is, I remember very well, and Francois was here really quiet. It was evident for him to be radical and quiet. It was really very important. And then after this, Francois was really very present at the International Council, even if this International Council was more open than at the beginning. And in fact, Francois was always attentive, careful, to maintain the World Social Forum space as an open space, but also to propose a radical way in the World Social Forum. For example, he participated with Samir, always, of course, in Bamako, to the proposal of a left proposal of the World Social Forum, and also in Porto Alegre, in the manifesto of Porto Alegre that he made with many other people, including Pérez Esquivel and many others. So this was Francois, and I have to say that in fact he was very interested in mobilization and in reflection, and trying always to link the two. And for example, I remember we had many discussions, deep discussion and really pleasant discussion at the moment where the apogee, I don't know the apogee.
At the top.
At the top, thank you, at the top of the World Social Forum, that means the World Social Forum of Belém in 2009. And I remember we had a large discussion with him because it is in Belém in 2009 then the idea of the common gained places in the World Social Forum. Because in Belém, 1 year after the financial crisis, in fact, we have for the first time an idea as a strategic discussion in the forum. On one hand, what is the urgency? What we have to do immediately? And so some proposal came out, and this proposal was coming in parts from many people of the World Social Forum and from ATTAC. It was the idea of fighting against fiscal paradise, suppressing fiscal paradise, and also the idea of the socialization of finance, and also the question of the tax, of the Tobin tax, and all the program that was proposed coming out of the World Social Forum, and who was taken into account by people in the United Nations, for example, Stiglitz, Amartya Sen, when they proposed what they called the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal.
Green Deal. Green Deal.
Green New Deal. No, it was Green New Deal because it was a reference to the New Deal of the crisis of 1929. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the United Nations Commission, led by Amartya Sen and Stiglitz, adopted a program that was in part coming from the ideas of the World Social Forum. Of course, it was not applied. But we have to remember that the New Deal was adopted by Roosevelt in 1933, but was applied after a world war in 1945. That means that the new ideas take time
We have some hope.
to be accepted. Yes, perhaps or not. Okay, so this was one of the issues of Belém. But the second issue of Belém was very interesting because some movements in Belém, the peasant movements, la Via Campesina, the women movements, the Amazonian people movements, and the ecological movements, say, but you know, it's not enough. We have not only to resist, we have also to propose an alternative. And the alternative was defined, and this alternative was the idea of the ecological, social, and democratical transition. But I will not enter into detail because it's a long discussion about what is the meaning of transition and the link between transition and revolution, which is a really important question. But it was this question. But what it was very interesting is that at this moment in Belém grew the idea that this new proposal of alternative was linked to new concepts, to new notions that were merging. And this new notion was the commons, the buen vivir, democratizing the democracy, social property, and some others. And so that's why, in fact, the question of the commons was a political proposal and was not only a scientific proposal. I think, and we had many discussions with Francois to say that, in fact, what was interesting in these proposals is that it was a multicultural proposal. Because, for example, you cannot translate buen vivir by living well. It's a new concept. As common is a new concept, a new way to discuss of the question of property, the basis of capitalism, and also the question of democracy, and also all this question. And so it was very interesting to see how Francois was excited by this idea of the new notions, and these new notions are not Occidental notions. It was not one time more Occidental concepts coming and applied. It was the try to build universal concept, perhaps universal is not the good word, but concept coming from multicultural, multilinguist proposal. And I think Francois was really very aware of this. And also, just to finish, I have to say that in the last years, Francois was very linked with the question of spirituality and not of religion. He said that religion was important, of course. Well, I don't know if he thought that Marxism was a religion, but in fact, religion was one of the link with spirituality. And, for example, in the last years, in 3 or 4 last years, Francois played a very important role. For example, with João Pedro Stedile, Francois prepared for the Pope the meeting of social movements in Vatican. And in this meeting, the Italian press put his title, "The Pope received the World Social Forum in Vatican." And in fact, it was one of the work of Francois. Francois, who worked very hard to help. I think the first idea was an idea of Stedile, of João Pedro, and he started from this, and including in the 2 or 3 last years of his life, he was really working on how to enlarge the question of mobilization and social movements. Thank you.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, compañeras y compañeros, I'm very, very pleased to be here in spite of this sad event of commemorating, but somehow I feel that he's here and he smiles at our interventions, which considerably after the statement we have heard is more and more looking like a mosaic. And I want to contribute to this mosaic saying that I'm a journalist, anthropologist from Austria, and I share with Francois this drive to outside the world. Let's say the contrast of being nostalgic of your own country, you are nostalgic of the world outside, and Francois, even in his last years when I called him and we tried to figure out, he said, yes, well, we could perhaps, because I'm meet somewhere in Europe because I'm just coming back from Vietnam, but it shouldn't be much later because I will be in South Africa, and then I travel again to Brazil. He was all the time on the move. That is one characteristic. He also was in the move politically. I met him, that is another thing which we shared together, during the 80s in Nicaragua, where he used to live for a very long time, very close to the Jesuits, very close to theology of liberation, and so he was really with a political compromise, and that is important because those who know in Central America a little bit will agree to me when I say it's not exaggerated to say that there wouldn't have been any Sandinista revolution, there wouldn't have been any FMLN and the successful guerrilla movements without the contribution of priests like Francois Houtart, like the Jesuits, who form part that made the movement enormously grow. That is one piece which goes back early to the 80s. The second piece I perhaps could contribute was after what Gus told in Davos in 98, I had the privilege to organize a conference in Austria under the title Strategies of Civil Society in Latin America and Europe. And there coincided people like Jean Pedro Sterile, like the later big advisor in foreign policies, Marco Aurelio Garcia, like those who were very close to the Zapatistas in Mexico, like Gilberto López y Rivas, etc., etc. And there was Francois Houtart. And I remember that it was at the lunchtime, not even at the official meeting, when Francois, in his, let's say, modest way, not imposing way, just asked the question. He said, perhaps we could do something against Davos, but in the framework, in another framework, because we need not agree on everything, but there are things which we agree on. And why let's not put this as a highlight to this? Afterwards, for the history, it is that especially João Pedro Sterile and the Brazilians took this up, and one day in a meeting in Geneva, all of a sudden two elegantly dressed people, Francois was also there, showed up, and I was asked, well, these people, are they not CIA agents? They look strange. And somebody told me, well, these people are not even speaking Spanish. It turned out that it was the governor of Rio Grande do Sul, it was the mayor, together with the mayor of Porto Alegre, Tarso Genro, who invited everybody to come to Porto Alegre, and that was the birth of the World Social Forum, for which Francois put his enormous intellectual input. There is a third mosaic stone I want to refer to. I had the privilege from 2000-2005 to coordinate what was at the time the biggest scientific study on autonomies, on multicultural autonomies, from indigenous autonomies, but also autonomies in Palestine, in Sri Lanka, and everywhere. So, and there, Francois, since all these scientific people came with different methodologies, he invented quite simply another methodology, calling it multifactorial accountants or something like that, multifactorial analysis, which gave everybody the opportunity to apply his methodology, but integrate it all together in a scheme which could promote dialogue. I was really impressed by this effort, which seemed to be a little, I mean, non-traditional in the sense that it did not have a big scientific bag behind. It was rather an intuition. And then there are some things which showed to me this intuitive capacity of Francois. Like, for instance, when I was in Rio de Janeiro and I had this terrible shake that all my camera, I'm a television journalist, all my camera equipment and so on had been stolen one evening, and I was really pissed off and terrible and so on. And all of a sudden, I met Francois, and Francois told me, he said, just think a little bit that in the same moment the camera was taken away, that instead of the camera was taken away, they would have taken away your life. What's better? Yes, he's right. It's better to lose one's camera than one's life. I mean, he had this way of pointing things around, like also when he was already verging towards the 90s when we together formed a delegation. Mireille also was there to go to Damascus with the idea to convince Bashar al-Assad of 3, 4, 5 points, which could be really, if it was implemented, have saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, and it was not also physically not quite easy, but he managed to do it, and with his characterization of mediating between different opinions, he always won his prestige of being the perfect pole of tranquility, even in the big thunderstorms. I asked myself, what would Francois and what had Francois said about the present situation, wherein somehow there is, a crisis, not only of capitalist system, but even of the system of the World Social Forum and others. And I remember it must have been around Belém, where we had this discussion always as in the World Social Forum, the ones who say we must preserve this absolute openness and people have to have an interchange of opinions, and then the networks would promote their goals and their struggles. And the others, which was, of course, mainly also advocated by the social movements, among others, the Via Campesina, and so, which somehow took distance because it was not, the World Social Forum was not verging to an action, to an action oriented, not towards a subjectivity of its own, but remained an open space, which is good or bad according to what everybody believes. But there was a sentence which I think could give a sort of a solution of Francois Houtart when he stood up, and also that side story many times, when I was sitting together with him and so on, it looked like Francois was sleeping, and he had his eyes closed, and even with his eyes closed, he begged for the floor, woke up, and he said things which were really right on. Like in this discussion I mentioned, he said, we have to think about the creation of a network of networks. Consider the World Social Forum as a network of networks, which was at the starting point for many discussions which then in Montreal and even now we have been taken up. So Saying in other words, Francois, yes, Francois is alive. I'm convinced about that. Thank you.
I'm sorry if my English is not so good. I'm Laura Pujol, I'm from Cuba. I'm the consul, the general consul here in Salvador de Bahia. It happens that I'm the wife of Carlos Tablada, the author of this book, of this biography of Francois Houtart. This book. So my floor here is in order to just say how grateful I am to Lau Kin Chi for all the troubles all the effort she made in order to have this book here today, all the rush, all the last minute corrections, and mostly with the intention of being able to bring to you today this book. I know Francois since picture that is here in the book in September 1997, when he came to my house with Giulio Giraldi, and he was also with Frei Beto at that time. It was before the first visit of the Pope to Cuba. They went there to prepare the visit of the first visit of the Pope in Cuba, and I met these three wonderful. Frei Beto I already knew, but Giraldi and Francois I didn't, and he made a great impression on me. In fact, this book is the second edition of the memoirs of Francois Houtart. The first one was in 2006, and it was a shorter version. It was a shorter version because it went until 2006, and in 10 years he added double the book, because his activity was so much, it was so frantic. You never knew where Francois was. He was always in the other side of the world when you less expected. Even when he had a strong nature, a strong health, it's not natural with almost 90 years to travel the world with small luggage, up and down, looking to make connections. And that is what distinguished for me Francois the most. He was able to link people. He was very able to link movements. He was able to create synapses between people and between the different movements around the world. It is true that he was at the beginning, as the other person said before, of the Social Forum. It was also true about the Davos demonstration. I accompany all those moments from my house and from the discussions that there happen. He always find everything delicious. No matter what I cooked, right away, something very quick, and his word was always, c'est fantastique, c'est magnifique. He always found everything special in life. And that's another lesson that Francois left for me, that you have to be able to enjoy all the small things in life, no matter how difficult the environment may appear. Because I saw him eat in places that were of reluctant conditions, but even so, he always found everything wonderful. And he was always grateful for the receptions that he received, no matter where he went. And the other thing I wanted to say about Francois is that even when most of the time he was involved with social movement, with sociology of religion, with a lot of intellectual deep issues that most of the person who deal with are atheists, who was profoundly Christians. His Christianism was of a contagious kind. And he was very respectful for other people and for other religions. But I remember the time he said to me, if you were to baptize your daughter, I will be glad to do so. And I say, but Francois, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in nothing of that. I'm not a Christian. That doesn't matter, Laura. Okay. But Carlos, he is not even baptized. He cannot, our son cannot be baptized because the fathers are not baptized. That is not written anywhere. It can be done. So, if one day you want to, I will be glad to do so. And in 2009, I said, I will do it. I'm not a Christian. I don't believe in the Eucharistia or any of those things. But it was a privilege for me to have my daughter baptized by Francois. And it was there in Louvain-la-Neuve, in the small church in the Cetri, that the most beautiful ceremony happened, only with us, with the family. And afterwards, in 2011, when my oldest son was born, he went to Havana and he said to me, you know, I don't come so often here. I said, I know, but it's time you come here to my house. When I was in Cuba, he slept in my house all the time. You can come here anytime yes, but I don't know when I will be coming back. So, if you were to baptize your other son, I will be glad to do so. Say, okay, Francois, let's do it right away. And the next day, just like that, because he was friends with most of the priests in Havana, we went to a church there. The Carlos Manuel de Céspedes, the priest of the church, gave him the floor to baptize my other son. That's to say, and afterwards here in Brazil, when he came here in Salvador to our house, he was always saying, when is the first communion? Maria is getting older. So even when he was very, very committed to all his work in sociology, all his works in the social movements, and all this engagement in social causes, he was able to transmit a deep religiousness that was indeed contagious. So I'm here to say thank you. I'm here to say, of course, thank you also to my husband that is not here today because he's in Singapore and lecturing and visiting his older son that lives over there. But he will be very honored to be here. I'm sure there will be other presentations of the book. And I want to thank him for giving us this book that I know by heart because I have read many, many times. I have helped in the corrections. I have helped choosing things in and out of the book. And I'm sure that it's going to be a delight and instructive moments, time periods. You will come back to him because here he is alive. And in here he is talking in the way that the book was made. It's like you're hearing him speaking, and in the very same language he used to transmit his idea and his acknowledgement. So to all his friends and all the people that work with, that had the privilege to accompany during his journey in life, I am very sure that Francois is watching us and is smiling, seeing that in his book presentation, everyone is even discussing important issues and the ideas of Francois that is in the, at least what matters the most. So thank you very much, Lau Kin Chi, and I hope you read the book and you like. I'm sure you are going to enjoy it very much. Thank you.
I'm Hermann Dworczak from the Austrian Social Forum and from the international network Prague Spring 2. Francois was a friend of mine for some decades. I met him at several conferences. And what I always could see when I met him, yes, was his total openness and his critical attitude. And it was very funny to see the story, the debates with Fidel Castro, and finally that Fidel said he was right, and not Fidel Castro himself. What we see today is this enormous rise of the far right on world scale. It is the consequence of the combined crisis of capitalism, and all that will be debated in this World Social Forum, so I will not speak about this. I want just to stress one point. It's not enough to say what we are against. We also have to say, in a humble way, what we are fighting for. What is our vision? What is our new narrative to win the people back who are running today behind the paradigm of neoliberalism, or even run behind all forms of right-wing populism, right-wing extremism, or in some cases even new forms of fascism. And I think in this debate, in elaborating new concepts for another society, in my opinion, a socialist society, the ideas of Francois Houtart play an important role. We have now the book, we can read it. I think we can learn a lot of him. And in this sense, I would say he is still with us, or as you say in Latin America, he is still presente.
Thank you. Mireille Fanon-Mendes-France, Frantz Fanon Foundation, and I am one of the speakers who does not know very well Francois Houtart. He was a comrade, he was not a friend, even if we appreciate each other. And what I think about him after meeting him in different places, I think the first one was in Ecuador during the permanent tribunal on transnational. And then we have other involvement. But my concern about Francois is not about common good. Because for me, what is the most important thing when we are speaking on common good is what is the common good for me is humanity. It is this sense of humanity, and the humanity was destroyed after, of course, after colonialism, but first of all, after enslavement and what it used to call discovery, the great discovery around 1492. And through water or Pachamama or other things, he tried to restore this sense of humanity and to also question how the humanity was created through the perspective of Occidental thinking, of le siècle, through the siècle de lumière and the what we call modernity, the white supremacy modernity. And it is exactly what he's doing, working on common good of humanity. And what we have to do with the World Social Forum is not only to work on common good, but to how to restore this sense of humanity, how to question what it was done under the belief of there is a hierarchization of race and, of course, a hierarchization of human beings. And that's why it is very important as the process of World Social Forum is going on to not only to make action or to act or to react, it's also to think, to produce thinking on what it is to decolonize mind. Because if we are not decolonizing minds, we will never succeed to change the world and to propose alternatives. Because we are, maybe, if we don't take care of that, we will even reproduce some thinking of domination, replication of thinking of domination. And we can see that among some solidarity movement and even the social movement. That's why it's really important to work on decoloniality of power. How the power, the dominant power, express its domination. And through law, for example, we have a lot of examples, and particularly with law against migrants, but also the way la terre en anglais, comment on dit? Not earth like that. Les champs. Land. Thank you. The land. The land is who is the owner of the land? The owner of the land is not the people who are working on the land, but the dominant, because they got these lands through a processes of domination, not because they are cultivated this land. And we can see that in South America, in Africa, in French Caribbean island, and a French colonial, still colonized country, and in other parts of in US, North America, and even in India, in a lot of countries, we could see the land is not belonging to the peoples who are working the land, and they are working the land to assume also to ensure their right of sovereignty, but just to. This land is belonging to the dominant, and it is exactly what Francois is doing. But I think we have to do that really through the sense and to restore this sense of humanity. It's really the most important thing, because right now we have a part of humanity which is divided in two: one part human being and the other part non-being. And we have, as a process of World Social Forum, we have to change this paradigm of division, and we have to make the non-being appear as a being. And it is our duty, and for that we have to think, to create, not only to resist, but to create elements of non-domination to force the dominant to change their paradigm of domination. And it is our duty to suggest, to force them, not to suggest, but to force them to change this sense of how they apprehend the humanity. And for me, Francois was also this kind of reflection, because we were together in different times in Venezuela for the meeting on international conference on defensa de la humanidad, defensora de la humanidad. And we were there was also Enrique Dussel and others, and we were thinking about that. That's all. Thank you.
Eu começo novamente. Eu trago um depoimento um breve depoimento do Movimento dos Trabalhadores Rurais Sem Terra do Brasil sobre a importante passagem de François Houtart pelo MST.
I want to bring here to you my experiences on the times that Francois visited us in our movement, in our social movements of workers sem terra, without land, here in Brazil, MST.
E também a importante contribuição, né, porque o MST sente uma relação tão forte com ele.
For his legacy, for his important contribution, and the reason why the MST has this strong relation with François Houtart.
Primeiro, ele foi um expoente de um seleto grupo de intelectuais comprometido nas lutas contra a opressão e as injustiças.
He was of a select group of intellectuals who were committed in the social struggles.
E também pela libertação dos povos dos cinco continentes do planeta.
And for the freedom of the people in all the 5 continents.
Para relembrar, aos 14 anos de idade, testemunhou as atrocidades da Segunda Guerra Mundial.
When he was 14 years old, he was a witness of the Second World War II.
Comprometeu-se profundamente com a Revolução Cubana.
He was deeply committed with the Cuban Revolution.
Engajou-se na luta contra as guerras do Vietnã.
He was engaged against the war in Vietnam.
Cultivou relações com pessoas que marcaram o século XX e o século XXI.
He was in strong relation with many of the great personalities of the 20th and 21st century, second half of the 20th and 21st century.
E não hesitou em assumir sua opção pelos pobres e explorados.
He never doubted taking side with the poor and exploited.
A exemplo de Dom Helder, Camilo Torres, Fidel Castro, José Comblim.
Dom Helder, Câmara. Dom Helder Câmara, Camilo Torres, no caso de Fidel Castro,
José Comblim.
E José Comblim.
Aprendeu a ver e ouvir os clamores do povo latino-americano.
He learned to see and to hear the voices of the Latin American people.
Nas atividades do Movimento Sem Terra, esteve presente e nos brindou com análises e contribuições que fazem parte e contribuíram muito na nossa história e nas nossas conquistas.
In many of our activities in the Movimento Sem Terra and the movement in MST, he was always present and he gave important contributions to the
história das nossas
to the
conquistas.
causes of the exploited and the achievement the movement has had during the years.
O MST rende homenagem à sua militância política e assumimos o compromisso.
O MST pays a tribute to this important figure and take the commitment
de honrar o seu legado, que é voltado especialmente para as lutas do MST.
To continue his legacy, especially continuing every day with the struggles of the MST.
Ou seja, a sua incansável busca por caminhos alternativos à barbárie capitalista.
Barbárie capitalista, não sei como se diz.
Não traduz.
Barbárie capitalista, mas la tienen que traducir. His pursuit against the disaster of capitalism.
Ok, que permeia o mundo e nos comprometemos a nunca desistir da
And we
luta.
will never give up in our fight. We will never abandon this legacy.
My name is Tsui Jade. You can call me Jade or Margaret. Now, okay. My name is Tsui. You can call me Jade or Margaret. I'm a university teacher in China, Chongqing, and we also involved in rural reconstruction movement. Actually, all our team actually are involved in rural reconstruction movement in China. And we have a good relation with Francois Houtart because we also think that the peasant agriculture will be the response to the collectivization and also the rural capitalism. Last year, before he passed away, in early July, he invited Kin Chi and I to talk about the peasant agriculture in China through the Skype meeting in Ecuador. But unfortunately, he passed away, and then we couldn't make this Skype conference. But his question always remind us how the peasant workers or peasant agriculture can contribute to fight against the capitalism in the 21st century. So he answers how the peasant worker work in China and how do peasants react facing the introduction of the market in his present forms in China. And in their project, a response is able to be a step towards a new paradigm. That means that peasant agriculture can it be a step beyond or a transition beyond the capitalism? This is his question, and it always reminds us how we respond to the present situation nowadays. And for the last few years, we had many interaction with Francois Houtart because we helped him cooperate with the secretary to organize a conference in Beijing. And we also conduct some rural research about the peasant in China. And we helped him to translate his book about the biofuels. And also, we also try to translate his book into Chinese, but now we in the early beginning. And then we think in the 2 years, we will have the Chinese version of his autobiography. And also, 2 years ago, we also organized the Social Forum for Alternative, and we talk and we invite the Francois Houtart to talk about the peasant agriculture in Latin America, because he also published a book about the peasant agriculture in Latin America. So our common interest is about the peasant agriculture, not only in Latin America, but also in Asia. And you know that Francois Houtart was a sociology, and hence he did a lot of research about the peasant situation in Sri Lanka and also in Vietnam. So I think we share very deep interest about the peasant agriculture and also the future of the rural society. So I think how we can contribute, I think in that sense, we think that peasant agriculture may step forward. Peasant agriculture will be a challenge to the capitalism at the present time. Thank you.
So I thank all the speakers before me. And first, I would like to say that Francois, he has been a very good friend because we have worked together a lot for the last 15 years in the World Forum for Alternatives. And we have been attending the World Social Forum almost all of them, and we have been meeting each other. And in all these forums and in these activities, we share a common concern about the question of ecology, especially because we feel that although many of us have one of our resources of thinking and thought from Marxism, we are very critical about the question of modernization and capitalism. And so it is not enough just to critique the social relations of exploitation. It is very important to talk also about the ecological consequences, and especially when the majority of the people on the margin suffer from these ecological catastrophes that go together with modernization and capitalism. That is why with Francois, then we have been proposing how we could be articulating socioeconomic justice together with ecological justice. That the question of ecology is not something that we should take up in the final stage before we already develop. So I think that this critique about the different stages of development, or different stages when we have the remedial work to deal with the consequences of capitalism, we are very much against this kind of dogmatic ideas. So we have been working a lot on the question of ecology and seeing this as one way in which we could be looking for paradigms, for post-capitalist paradigms. And Francois talked a lot about the common good of humanity, and he was trying to articulate in a coherent way our proposals for a different world, which is a world of humanity. But he is not speaking about these ideas as empty ideas of a visionary. He was doing this based on his very concrete experiences in the field. He has been to many places, and actually when he was very young, when he was a student, he was already traveling around, and he said that he is himself a Latin American, because at that time he traveled to many countries in Latin America, and somehow like Che Guevara, so he was seeing the misery and the strength of the people who are working and living at the ground level. So it is this encounter with the poor, with the marginalized, with the underprivileged, that he, as a priest, felt that the church had not done enough. He felt that and that is why he has so much developed liberation theology, so that we would be looking for how we can be encountering the problems both at the ground level and at the same time at the macro level. So that is why, on the one hand, he would be speaking in the United Nations commissions, he would be talking to different heads of states, he would be talking to different, even the World Bank or the others at that level, at the policy level. And he was trying to propose in the UN Declaration for the Common Good of Humanity. But at the same time, he has been working a lot on the ground. So he has traveled so much to different places in Latin America and Asia and Africa. And he has been involved in different peace missions. So he was there on people's tribunals about Syria, about Sudan, about different places. But at the same time, then he was very much with the workers. And so, for example, in Sri Lanka or in China or in Vietnam, he has tried to reach and to talk to people in the communities. When he was in Ecuador for quite a number number of years in this last period, he had been going to see the farmers who were farming on broccoli, and knowing the situation, he would be writing letters to the president at that time, Rafael Correa, who was his student, to talk about the situation of the workers, of the marginalized, and saying what could be done. So he would be talking about immediate steps that could be taken to improve the situation, but at the same time, he would be proposing the medium-term and the long-term perspectives for change. So he is exemplary in working both for alternative practices and alternative visions and theories. But anyone who knows Francois would be very impressed by his gentleness. He was a very gentle, very kind person, very sympathetic, but at the same time, I saw him with a lot of fury about the state that the people are in, that the majority of the people are in. He is so furious that he wants to do something. And I think we see him as a person of great energy, but I think his energy comes from his optimism and hope that something could be done. He would never give in to despair, to helplessness, to feeling vulnerable. He would always be looking for ways to do something, to make steps forward. And so just now, Laura and Mireille were saying that he is a man who was very much for humanity, and he was a religious person. But I find him that he is maybe a better way to describe him is that he was a man of faith. He had such a lot of faith in goodness, in kindness, in generosity, that he felt that the world could be improved. And it is this faith in humanity, in others and in himself, and that we could be doing something. And this is this optimism and hope that have been so contagious. And it was a privilege for us to help to help the publication of this book, this biography in English. And you find that in all these pages, you could see a man who was totally committed to the common good of humanity, to trying to finding alternatives. And you could also see the details in which he would recount his encounters with different people, his ideas. So it could also be read not only as a biography of a person, it's a kind of a documentation and an archive of his times. How he was engaged in different ways, and I remember that he was so tolerant of different ideas that when in China he wanted to see monasteries, Buddhism, and then we presented him with the gift of the Buddha. And he was very, very happy. And so he was one who was very inclusive of different ideas and of different possibilities. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the team, the Global University for Sustainability working team in Hong Kong, because the whole team worked for 3 weeks during the Chinese New Year holidays to do the proofreading, etc., so that we can manage to bring this book out in time for the World Social Forum. And I hope you will be able to see the person and his living ideas in this book. And thank you very much for coming. I think we can now open to the floor. So if any of you would have like to say anything, to ask any questions, or if the speakers here have anything to add, please do so. So could we invite any questions? Yes.
Buenas tardes. Yo soy Frederico Coffeurs, hablo español porque hace 30 años que vivo en Nicaragua. Llegado a Nicaragua por Francois Houtart En realidad he tenido la dicha de haber sido estudiante suyo.
My name is Frederico Coffeurs. In spite of the name, I don't speak English. I speak Spanish because I've lived for over 30 years in Nicaragua. I was taken there by Francois Houtart, and I had the privilege of being his student.
In sociology.
In sociology.
Y bueno, quería dar dos testimonios que me parecen importantes. No voy a ser muy largo. El primero era testimoniar de que en la vida de Francois Houtart, que conocí bastante de cerca hace años, él combinaba perfectamente el lema, ¿no? Pensar globalmente, actuar localmente.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that Francois was one who combined very good the thought of think globally, act locally.
Pensar globalmente, en primer lugar, porque en una universidad católica como la Universidad de Lovaina, donde estudié con él sociología, con una especialidad en sociología de la religión.
Thinking globally, it means, especially in Lovaina, where it's a Catholic university, and where I studied sociology of the religion with Francois.
Pues enseñar una lectura marxista de la religión era bastante atrevida. Les estoy hablando de los principios de los años 80.
In the early 80s, to teach sociology of religion, given a Marxist point of view on the religion, it was quite erratic for the time.
Eso, entonces era bastante atrevido. Después, bueno, terminé los estudios y a propuesta suya me fui para Nicaragua a trabajar con él, entre otros, en el centro de investigación que él había armado ahí, en la Universidad de los Jesuitas.
When I finished my studies, I went to Nicaragua to work in the Jesuit university, in this research center from the university in Nicaragua.
Sí. Bueno, eso era en los años 80, ¿no? La época de la revolución.
That was in the 80s, in the Sandinist revolution.
Y ahí viene la otra parte, o sea, el mismo día con François podíamos tener en su casa una cita, una reunión con algunos de los comandantes de la revolución.
In the same day, we could meet at François' house with the commanders-in-chief of the revolution.
Que eran en esa época semidioses, ¿no?
Yeah, by that time there was sacred, almost like semi-gods.
También donde desfilaban gente como, qué sé yo, Paulo Freire, que conocí en su casa, cosas así.
Many intellectuals like Paulo Freire at the same place.
Y en la tarde íbamos a hacer encuestas en los mercados o hacer entrevistas en cooperativas agrícolas, donde él ya tenía algo como 75, casi 80 años. E íbamos caminando en comunidades rurales para hacer entrevistas con líderes.
That very same afternoon, in which we had in the morning speak with the great leaders, the afternoon we go out and walk through the peasant communities to make our research. It was very struggling, even when he already had over 70 years old. So it was a person who had a good condition to do that kind of work, hard work.
Y además, y bueno, termino con esto, resulta que además de haber sido estudiante suyo, somos originarios del mismo pueblo. Yo soy originario de Otigny, al lado de la Universidad de Nicaragua.
I came from the same village in which Francois was born, Rodigny.
No was born.
What?
Donde vivía.
Where he lived in Rodigny.
Y, por ejemplo, él promovió un hermanamiento entre un pueblo de Nicaragua, Massiah, y nuestro
Rodigny.
pueblo en Bélgica.
So at the time he went to Nicaragua, he promoted the twinage, no se dice en inglés, the twinage of two villages. That from Nicaragua, a small village, and the small village in Belgium from Rotigny, where he's from.
Y yo recuerdo perfectamente que él, bueno, eso era bastante desgastante, ¿no?
That meant a lot of hard work too.
Pero él decía que él creía mucho en este trabajo de hormiga.
And he said he believed in this hard work of everyday ant work.
Que eso era lo que hacía cambiar el mundo.
That this small work, ant work from each one of us was the one who was able to change the world.
Era una persona muy humilde.
He was very humble.
Eso es todo.
That's it. Thank you.
So, sorry, I will speak in English if you don't mind, because you understand this. Je pourrais le faire en français, je préférerais, mais bon. Well, I have to say, you know, and happily, there is only one way to have an agreement with Davos people, is to accept their sovereignty. There is no other way. And happily, I say. And you know, there is one of the billionaires, one of the richer people in the world. His name is Warren Buffett. And Warren Buffett, 2 years ago, he says, you know, many people say that they don't know if there is a class struggle. And I can tell them, yes, there is a class struggle, and my class is winning. So this is the question. If we accept that the class of Davos win, we can agree with them. If we don't accept, we have to fight. I am sorry. There is no other way.
You can ask us Cubans about
Yeah, we can. You can say, you can testimony this. Well, now, about your question from how Francois linked the question of the grassroots and the question of elaboration. Well, I think, in fact, I think that we have to start from grassroots. We have to start from the way that people live and to hear them, because they speak. So we have to hear them to understand what they say. And for this, we have to live with them. I think this is his choice as a priest. His choice as a priest was to live with people on the ground and not to live with people only in his family, because his family was a very big family. But he made the choice to go to the people.
He was to be count.
Yes, he was a vicomte.
He resigned.
Yes. He was one of...
Count. Count to Francois Houtart.
He was a big...
It was the title that he was entitled to in order for his birth. But he resigned
Yes.
in order to devote to his work.
So he said, I have to go to the people. But the question was not, I go to the people, I heard what they say, and then I will say what you have to do. No. He says that we have to build together a new knowledge. And this is very important. And how to build this new knowledge? Well, I think this is what gave us the World Social Forum. The idea is that movements can collectively give the world and give an elaboration of people, and win and invent some new things. Well, for example, if I take La Via Campesina, they build a theory. They build a theory with some intellectuals working with them, but not this, by their action. And by their action, they contest the ruling way. They contest the idea that the only way to make agriculture is agro-industry. They say, we want to make a peasant agriculture. This idea was a fully idea 20 years ago. Now, it's an accepted idea. And they always give the idea that we have to make ecology in agriculture. And they give the idea we don't want, comment on dit OGM, genetic modified. So as a movement, peasants, they build a theory starting from action and from struggle. And I think Francois really agree with this. We have to start from the position and the elaboration. So intellectuals are needed. They are not, they are interesting, but they are interesting if they work with the collective movement of people.
Francois started working in sociology of religion as a priest from the Catholic Church in order to understand and in order to improve the reach of the Catholic Church in Latin America. That was his first studies. But in doing so, he went to the United States. He went all over Latin America. And he, that already knew Marxism, became a convicted communist. His analysis, all his analyses were Marxist analysis. And during most of his intellectual life, what he was trying to do is how do we learn based on the way that the church does its work in order to create networks all over the world. How do we use that in order to change the world into a new system? That was, for me, in short words, the vision of Francois. That's what he was trying to do.
Is it captured in the book?
Yes.
That's captured in the book?
Yes, that's the of the book.
Throughout this session, we have been doing the live streaming. So our friends in Asia, in different places, they have been able to reach us. So that is what we were doing with the machine over there for the live streaming. For this book, it is available on the website for free. So you can do the free download of the whole book you can go to the website of the Global University and do the free download and just disseminate, circulate to all the friends, because we feel that Francois would also love to have his book being read by different people. And also on this website, we have done interviews with Francois. So that was what we showed you at the very beginning. We showed his photographs, but we also showed the interviews. So, for example, he was talking about Fidel Castro, arguing with him about the World Social Forum in India and not in Latin America. And so you can go there, and under Life and Thought, we have interviews with over 50, 60 thinker activists. So if you would like to listen to the stories of Sami Amin, Francois Houtart, Mireille, Gustave, and Wallerstein, so we have all the stories uploaded on the Global University website. So please visit the website. And tomorrow we have 2 other sessions in 2 different places. So please come to the sessions. One is on the experiences in China, especially from the grassroots perspectives. And then the one in the afternoon, we would like to talk a little bit more about community experiences and how we can be learning from them from the different places. We have applied to have the interpreting in English, Portuguese, and Spanish, but unfortunately, I think there's so much going on, and so some things are not really coming up. So we apologize for that, but we hope that we will see you again tomorrow. Thank you again for coming.